racing. It struck here at Laguna Seca Raceway yesterday. It struck suddenly and totally without mercy. Gonzalo Rodriguez was practicing for the second round of qualifying during the morning session when suddenly straight off the course and into a barrier. He was killed instantly. Immediately, the racetrack went silent. The team that fielded the car, Team Penske, was stunned by the occurrence, as was the entire rest of the racing community. Late in the day, there was a memorial service for Gonzalo, but it could not replace the loss that the series was in fact feeling. Despite the fact that this was a new driver to the series, he was one that had a great deal of promise, and he himself was looking forward to so much opportunity racing in these cars. Now, Parker Johnstone and I had the opportunity to spend some time with him at Detroit, the only other race that he's been at this year. It was good time, but it was way too short. It was much too short, Paul. And as you said, he was a rookie to the series, but he had had success in go-karts, British Formula 3, and Formula 3000. He was bright, articulate, very, very friendly. And in fact, this was just his second race, but yet he was widely accepted in the car community, and his loss was a loss for all. Gonzalo Rodriguez was 27 years old. He was from Montevideo, Uruguay. He is survived by his parents and by a sister. We extend our sympathies to his family, his friends, his fans, and Team Penske.
I don't see why the...
Oh, this kid is good. So very, very good.
I haven't been thinking about the Rookie of the Year a long time ago. You know, I've been thinking about the championship.
Montoya trying to move to the inside of Jill DeFerrin. Montoya moves into the lead. Montoya just quickly makes a move on the leader, Max Pappas. You're the man. Who's the man? You! If Montoya is the man today, he will tie the records for consecutive wins and wins in a season. The pressure is on a young man who seems to ignore it. From just inland from the Monterey Peninsula of California at Laguna Seca Raceway, it's the Honda Grand Prix of Monterey featuring the Shell 300. Well, welcome to Laguna Seca. I'm Paul Page with Parker Johnstone. Despite the sadness that we face here, there is still a race to run. There is still a championship. And one of the key players in that, Juan Montoya, is certainly going to be affected by the happenings of yesterday because he was, in fact, a fellow competitor with Gonzalo Rodriguez in the Formula 3000 in the past couple of years. Now, how does that play into the fact that, additionally, Montoya is starting way, way back in 16th starting position in this quest for the championship?
Well, we've talked about Montoya's quickness with his hands and his feet in the car all year long, his great car control, but Paul, the one shining element of Juan Montoya is his mental toughness. And it may sound cruel, it may sound dark, but Montoya will strap on this race car this afternoon, block out all memories of Gonzalo for the moment, and Montoya will become one of the world's best race car drivers once again. 16th spot, that's just an added challenge for him. I would expect him, as he's overcome all other obstacles, to move to the front by the time this race is over.
Now remember, there was only one qualifying session, so let's take a look at the starting grid and how they will line up for today's run. The front row is, of course, Brian Herta, with Tony Kanaan starting outside the front row. Brian Herta sits on the pole for the third consecutive year. Last year, he scored his one and only victory here. He hopes to make it two.
There is absolutely no question Brian Herta loves Laguna Seca. 7 times he's come here to race either in Indy Lights or in Champ Cars. He's never started outside the front row. You know, of course, that he broke through, got the first career victory here last year. Now he starts from the pole again, and there's a lot on the line because it's not believed that Brian Herta is going to be back with Ray Hall Racing next year. He wants to prove today that last year was no fluke, that he's still capable of running with the elite in the Champ Car set.
In the second row, there is Max Pappas still looking for a victory at Laguna Seca. Greg Moore starts on the outside. Row 3, Michael Andretti. And Mauricio Guzman on the outside of the third row. In the fourth row, Adrian Fernandez is back. Scott Pruitt will start on the outside of row 4. In the 5th row, it's Jill DeFerrin, and alongside is Elio Castro-Neves. DeFerrin scored his first career victory in the 1995 season finale here at Laguna Seca. DeFerrin is looking to score one more win for Derek Walker. 6th row, Paul Tracy and Dario Franchitti.
And Dario Franchitti starts on row number 6 because for the second time in 2 years, he finds himself off the racetrack in Friday qualifying at the exit of turn number 6. Says the car hit the curb, bottom, and I found myself in the wall with heavy damage. They've been unable to repair that car, so he's in the backup car. And he says, you know, we tried it in the morning, we tried some new settings. I didn't like it. We put it back the way we had it. I should be fine.
Going further down the grid, Jimmy Vasser on the inside of row 7. Roberto Moreno, super sub, on the outside. Vasser clinched the championship here in 1996. He won the race in 97. Possible he could return to victory lane today. Patrick Carpentier inside row 8. Juan Montoya, there he is, way back on the outside. Cristiano D'Amata and Robbie Gordon make up row number 9. The 10th row is made up of Michel Jourdain Jr. and Mark Blundell to the outside. In the 11th row, Andrea Montermini and Mimo Gidley. The 12th row for the run here at Laguna Seca, Jan Magnussen and Luis Garcia Jr. And in row 13, Naoki Hattori and Richie Hearn. Al Unser Jr. went home when Team Penske withdrew, and Shigeaki Hattori has had his license revoked because the chief steward did not feel he was up to the quality of this series.
Certainly the challenge for most of these teams and drivers. They practiced in the cool, damp conditions this morning. The sun's now out. It's hot. And Paul, I'm really wondering about Adrian Fernandez. We've got one corner, turn number 9, 3.5 Gs. Lots of force, lots of very, very effort needed to get down the hill into that last series of corners. He's got that broken wrist with the pins, with the screws. Can Adrian tough it out for almost 2 hours?
And of course, we will have an onboard camera with Adrian, as well as Michael Andretti. We've shown you the other onboards. Here is Tony Kanaan. Track here, you've mentioned the elevation changes.
Elevation changes are really difficult for the drivers. This corner that we just saw Tony coming into is blind on the entry, and then it makes a rapid climb all the way up to 929 feet at the top of the corkscrew. The drivers fall off a 10-story building, heading back down the hill for that final corner that then leads onto the pit straight.
Well, the field's already started, is in fact rolling. We come to the top of the hill. This is the top of the corkscrew, and as a result of the accident, look at what they've done with the tires. There is now an entirely second line of tire barriers set out. They've actually taken tires from other parts of the racetrack and built this in second line of barrier to help give additional protection at the top of the corkscrew. They come down the sweeping set of turns that brings them back down the hill for a final left-hander toward the pits and toward the start-finish line.
Lots of passing opportunities here at Laguna. Watch Franchitti, watch Montoya in turn 2 and turn 5, also coming down into turn 11. They should make their moves early on this initial start.
Brian Herta brings the field off of the final turn. Kanaan alongside. They look for the green flag, which lies just ahead. And we're ready to go already. Kanaan turns to the inside across the front of Pappas. They scream through the first turn. Head down for the second. They're 5 wide at one point here. Will they all make it through? Back in the field? So far they do. They come off now. A quick touch there. One car off to the inside. That looks to be Castro-Neves. Now the field begins to accelerate through a series of right-handers.
This is amazing, Paul. Remember in the past, right in this section, we've had the cars lock wheels, big accidents in the past, but so far, just minor contact.
Montoya trying to work his way up through the field. Brian Herta still leads it. You see Montoya, get a glimpse of him there for a second. Both he and Franchitti have a tremendous job ahead to cut up through this field as quickly as they possibly can. Paul Tracy darts out, looks to the inside. Guzman right behind him, now climbing to the top of that 10-story drop.
And on the opening move down into turn 2, Paul Tracy, brilliant down the inside, moving up from 11th place. He's now in 8th.
DeFerrin almost totally loses the back end, but he saves it. Now they sweep down the hill toward that left-hander that brings them in view of the pit crews for the first time on this run. There is Dario Franchitti. He is still in 12th place.
And really, Paul Tracy, Paul, was the big winner there on that opening lap. Very aggressive, but very clean, making a big move at the start.
Montoya screams across the line as well. He has come up a position or two. In fact, Montoya has moved up, well, just one when they got to the line. A single position on the lap. Franchitti did not move. He moved up 2 as he got to the line. So Franchitti actually with a bigger set of moves than Montoya on the first lap. Paul Tracy made a great move from 11th up to 7th.
Coming down into turn 2 with Michael Andretti. Look at the action in front of him. Oh, this is close, Paul. You don't want to be on the outside. There's no race driver. You can see him rub wheels. Michael charges through, blocks down the inside, going into turn 4. A great move by Michael Andretti.
That action on the first couple of turns on the first lap. Now the field coming down through the corkscrew once again. There's the front of the field. Brian Herta leads it. Kanaan sits in second. Max Pappas third. Michael Andretti, despite scrubbing with Greg Moore, still sits back and forth, followed by Moore, Fernandez, Tracy, Guzman, and Franchitti now in ninth. Looking back up the track here, Fernandez, Tracy, Guzman. Best fight on the circuit, though, for the moment, it's broken off. Now Adrian Fernandez moves in on Moore, while at the same time Tracy beginning to work on Fernandez.
Franchitti also looking on the inside, the outside of Mauricio Guzman. We can see him just coming into the picture there. Dario so good under brakes, especially on cold tires with full fuel. He's able to find the limit immediately.
Well, Guzman wasn't bad in these first couple of laps. He started, and then he probably got intimidated by the fact that Franchitti was sitting there. He started 6th, dropped to 8th. Dario started in 12th, now sits up in 9th.
Oh, Paul Tracy locking the wheels up there, going into the top of the corkscrew. From the driver's perspective, they come over the top. All they're looking at is blue sky and treetops. You have to plan the braking exactly right. The car's unweighted. Very, very easy to lock brakes, as we saw Paul do.
Brian Herta starts on the pole, remains there, and in fact is beginning to pull away from second place Tony Kanaan. Last lap he was at about 8/10, now 9/10. Ahead is through that little bend that really is turn 1, and then hard down into the left-hander that is 2. Here is Brian Herta. Now working the flat, what many of the old-timers here will call the new section of this race course. Was actually added for the Grand Prix bikes to fit the FIA/FIAM standards.
Yeah, I'm one of those drivers that call it the new section, Paul.
That's kind of why I brought it up, Park.
Well, right now we've only got 2 drivers in the 1-minute 11-second bracket. That's Brian Herta. Tony Kanaan just turned the quickest race lap at a 1:11.7. Several drivers in the 1:12s, Pappas, Andretti, Moore, and then back to Tracy, Guzman, and Franchitti. Everybody else in the 1:13s. So already a big gap. Remember, they didn't get all the track time they normally would have had. It's really up to the teams and the engineers to try to figure out the best settings for these hot afternoon conditions here in Monterey, California.
And Brian Herta had a remarkable year last year, leading all but 2 laps. The other 2 led by Franchitti. We're inland from the Pacific Ocean. It's beautiful out there on the Monterey Peninsula. No change in the standings since we left you here at Laguna Seca as you look down over the hills of Laguna Seca from the Honda Helicam right on the edge of what used to be Fort Ord, but of course that base now been closed. On the track itself, Naoki Hattori had a quick on and off the course, but got it back on without any problem. Because of the nature of this circuit, you see, looking from Tony Kanaan's view up ahead to the leader, how wide open it is. It almost draws you in to take a few extra risks and run out there on the brown stuff.
We speak so often of the versatilities of these drivers, their crews and engineers. Keep in mind that they've been surrounded by concrete at Vancouver, at Chicago on 1-mile ovals. They only have 4 permanent road courses on the schedule. Laguna Seca being one of them, of course, Portland, Mid-Ohio, and Elkhart. So the drivers finally, most of them having road race backgrounds, are back to home ground where they were trained in go-karts and other junior formulas. And yes, it does suck you in to try to get that little bit extra. You've got curbs to run on, but keep in mind these curbs, as we watch coming down, are usually off camber, and if you use them, sometimes it just leads to bigger problems.
Tony Kanaan is stabilized about 9/10 of a second behind the leader, Brian Herta. The second race that Herta has led this year. He also led one lap at Long Beach. We mentioned that Mauricio Guzman appeared to be having trouble on the opening laps. Gary Gerald, what's up there?
Yeah, he slipped back a couple of positions, Paul. Just check with Russell Cameron and this crew, and they say that they believe the vibration that Mo was complaining about comes from new brake pads that were installed. And he said sometimes it takes a handful of laps for them to seat or get bedded correctly. They hope that that problem goes away within the next few moments.
Well, Guzman currently sits back in 8th place with Dario Franchitti. You see Franchitti right there working Guzman pretty hard. Juan Montoya has made no move forward. He is currently in 15th position. Juan, is this part of the strategy?
Well, you know, I just asked Chip Ganassi because it just looked like Juan Montoya was not making a move towards the front. They didn't seem too concerned about it. They say there's nothing wrong with the car. I wonder if they have chosen to run a real lean fuel setting to save fuel and try and make up all their spots on pit road.
Well, keep in mind that the past few races, Montoya has not been happy with the car on Friday. Sometime Saturday, his engineer, Morris Nunn, has made big changes to the car, and it's usually come right either in morning warm-up or for the race itself. Well, the canceling of yesterday afternoon's qualifying, they've had to spend all their energies this morning scrubbing tires, and in Mauricio Guzman's case, trying to get brakes run in, and some of the teams haven't been able to get all that work accomplished. So I'm wondering if they just got a little bit behind in the setup. Remember, Jimmy Vasser, his teammate, has run so strong here in the past, qualifying on the pole just a few years ago, and he's started back in 13th place, currently running in 12th. So I wonder if it's just a lack of time, a lack of setup for the conditions for this weekend.
Well, when you lost that qualifying session and a good part of the morning practice as well, they only got about 24 minutes in. You certainly lost a lot of other opportunities that they really need. You know, sometimes you say, well, why do they have so much practice ahead of the race? The fact is, because they need that and more.
The cars are so sensitive to even the smallest changes that the track changes from moment to moment, let alone day to day. And you really have to need that time in order to get that car right where you want it for the driver, for the tires, for the team, in order to get the most out of your equipment.
It seems that now everyone has stabilized. The real surprises are no real advancing moves by Montoya, and only a slight move forward by Dario Franchitti, as Montoya moved from 16th to 15th and Franchitti from 12th up to 9th. Jan?
Well, at the beginning of the race, Chip Ganassi spoke to Juan Montoya on the radio and said, be careful when you get up behind Roberto Moreno, because Moreno has quite a bit to prove here, because we're expecting to see Christian Fittipaldi back possibly at Houston. So heads up for Chip Ganassi, knowing that we're going to have a very motivated Roberto Moreno that's in front of him now.
Well, 2 cars off. One of them is D'Amata. The other DePerrin.
Oh, Mark Blundell.
Mark Blundell.
Yep.
And D'Amata's having trouble getting it pointed in the right direction. Well, finally he is, if he can get it going. And Cristiano does finally get it going. That down on the flatter section of the course. Turn 3 and 4.
Well, it's a little hard to see there, but it does look like Mark was just into the back of Cristiano D'Amata's car as they came through the apex, spun them both quickly around.
Well, and Magnussen was the one that came through almost immediately, and he really had to cut through to the right side. D'Amata finally got it fired, pointed in the right direction, and has continued on, but it's affected D'Amata. He's now down to 19th. Blundell, when he crossed the line before, was in 20th. He'll, of course, show up probably 18th next time around.
And the other driver we haven't mentioned that also moved up a few places at the start was Robbie Gordon, running the Eagle chassis this weekend. Remember, when they went to the Eagle, they thought they'd just run it on the ovals, but they've also found the car to be working very, very well on the road courses. He's in 16th position.
Back up at the front and at the top of the circuit, Brian Herta now beginning that 10-story plunge from the peak of elevation down to the bottom, which is the pit road. Sweeps out down the hill, makes the left-hander, then the right, and back towards the left once again. Gary Gerald.
Quick update on the leader, Brian Herta, who absolutely loves Laguna Seca. He's reporting to his crew a little bit of understeer, said it's not too bad. Bobby Rahal, meanwhile, on the radio with Brian, doing a little cheerleading, saying, you're doing great, keep it up.
Back in 6th position now, Adrian Fernandez. Remember the story of his right wrist.
And you can see, Paul, how gingerly he's holding the wheel with the right hand, a big brace around his lower hand and his wrist. And this is a very, very physically demanding circuit. Through turn number 3, 140 miles an hour on the entry here to turn number 4. Just at 175 miles here on the brake, down a couple of gears, down to third, through turn 5. But you can see even the straightaways are relatively short with the speeds they're carrying. They're always busy, shifting, turning, braking, lateral G's going from side to side, plus the uniqueness of Laguna, several corners blind on entry. You've got to know this track, just not visually. You just have to know it intuitively, because for a lot of the places, you can't see where to brake, you can't see where to turn the wheel. Very, very mentally demanding on the drivers.
And it still amazes me as we watch Fernandez come down the hill in 6th, how busy they truly are in the cockpit of these champ cars here at Laguna Seca. We'll be right back. Aaron, who has dropped from 10th down to 15th. Jan Bigas, what's going on there?
Well, it seems as though they went to change the fuel mixture for Gilles de Ferran, and when they did, his Honda engine didn't pick up the way that he wanted. He must have gone too lean. So he lost some momentum. They put the mixture back, and now he should be able to continue at the speed he had.
De Ferran, as he works the course, Herta leads it, then Canan, Pappas, Andretti, Moore, Fernandez, and Tracy. 66 laps to go. 83 laps of scheduled distance. That's 185.7 miles. Looking back in the field now, this is where they have been close for some considerable laps, but no change. There's actually a lot going on from 8th position, currently occupied by Guzman, all the way back to two just ahead of Montoya. Now there's Montoya, who again started 16th, now has only moved one position further, and that's up into 14th. At the same time, the other competitor in the championship fight, the top 2 of that fight, that certainly is not over yet, Dario Franchitti, sits in 9th place.
We see this fight between Pruitt, Vassar, Castroneves, Moreno, and Montoya. And you notice that the spacing is almost equal between all of these cars. They get any closer, there's a lot of aerodynamic turbulence. So they just naturally fall back at about this distance, and unless the competitor in front of them makes a significant mistake, they won't be able to move forward. Right now, I think they're kind of waiting to see how the fuel load burns affects the handling of the cars, and then see if they can make a push here as we get close for that first pit stop in the next 10 laps.
Watching him drive, Montoya, part of, I'm sure, of the Chip Ganassi strategy, seems to have elected to work very carefully to the front, and in fact probably hold any real maneuvers until after they've got at least one stop out of the way. Jan Bigas?
Well, you know, I asked the question of Chip Ganassi, are you just holding back and saving fuel? Well, he didn't want to answer that question for obvious reasons, but we do know that he has been telling Juan on the radio, we need you to save just a little bit more fuel. So I assume that is their strategy. Save it early now and make a run later when you can dial in the car the way you want it.
So Montoya, really 2 positions forward is all that he has actually managed to work, and one of those really when de Ferran made his move more toward the rear when he had his fuel problem. On board Michael Andretti now on the pit straight. There's the start-finish line. Crest this hill, which is turn 1, and now down to 2. Andretti currently sits in 4th. Greg Moore is 5th, just behind him. Remember, opening lap, they touched wheels. Moore got inside the right side of Andretti, and they brushed against Andretti's right front. Doesn't appear to have caused any problem. In fact, I've been trying to look at the car to see if there are any marks anywhere other than on the wheels, and since you can't tell on the wheels, you certainly don't see any half circles on the side pods.
Doesn't seem to have affected the cars at all. Their lap times consistently in the 1-minute, 11-second bracket range. Lap after lap after lap. Right now, Brian Herta has turned the quickest race lap at a 1-minute 10.9. Tony Kanaan at a 1:11 flat. Everyone else 2, 3, 4, 5 tenths of a second back. So first and second place significantly quicker than the rest of the field. Michael and Greg now running consistently in the mid-111s.
As Michael Andretti comes down toward the 11th and final turn, got a good look at the front suspension. Obviously, it's in good shape. Back to the front of the field, Brian Herta, who is now 2.7 seconds ahead of second place Tony Kanaan. They're pulling away at the front of the field. Jan Vikas, you have some reason as to why?
Well, the speculation up and down pit road is that both the leaders, which would be Herta and Kanaan, are not saving fuel, whereas Max Pappas and Beck, they are drivers that have decided to try and save some. So we may be seeing the two different fuel strategies play out. We certainly have heard those conversations on the radio, but of course the teams don't want to come right out and confirm it.
Just checking on with Tim Cindric, who's on the radio with Max Pappas. I said, are you in the conservation mode? He says, well, actually, we're just trying to play it smart to ensure the fact that we can make this as a two-stop race. So he wouldn't just come out and say, no, we're definitely trying to save fuel. But it seems to be a little different strategy here involved, even between the teammates Herta and Pappas.
Yeah, Pappas is in third place, but he is 5 seconds behind second place Tony Kanaan. Look at that. Look at the distance. That's Kanaan just passing under the overpass. Now we wait, and we'll wait a little bit more for Max Pappas. There he finally comes into view.
And that's the advantage of having a two-car team, is obviously what Herta and Kanaan are doing. We first saw that strategy play out with DeFerrin back at Portland. They just went to full rich and went for it. But if a yellow comes out at the wrong time, they're going to have problems. Max Pappas, the teammate of Brian Herta, he's laying back a little bit. He may hit the yellow correctly. It could pay big dividends for him by the end of the race.
So the shell car of Brian Herta started on the pole here, has remained in front of the field and leading his second race of the year here in the Honda Grand Prix of Monterey, featuring the Shell 300. We'll be back. Raceway, don't forget that ESPN starts its second full season of Sunday Night Football. 17 games of NFL action starting. The Pittsburgh Steelers as they face the Cleveland Browns from Cleveland Browns Stadium in Cleveland, Ohio. For more, log on to ESPN.com, part of the Go Network, go.com. Elio Castroneves suddenly turns down the pit road. This is only 23 laps complete, and he stays out on the main straightaway. Made a turn that looked like he was going to try to get it off the track. He wasn't able to do that. There was some report that he and Jimmy Vasser got together just a few seconds ago. This position may in fact bring out a full course yellow. If it does, it would do that maybe 4 laps ahead of an ideal time for pit stop.
It would, but according to my calculations, this is right on the ragged edge of the pit window to still make it in 2 stops and get to the end. I'm sure the full course yellow will come out. You will see everyone dive into the pits.
We mentioned earlier that Bobby Rahal has been on the radio to race leader Brian Herta, almost coaching him all the way around the racetrack. And just a few moments ago, he told Herta that he could go ahead and richen his mixture up a bit if he cared to do so, that they wanted to get 1.92 miles per gallon. There's Bobby Rahal watching. Full course yellow does come out.
Come in, Brian, pit.
And Rahal
open, look for Cole.
Rahal called.
Speed limiters on. Around Jimmy. Hit our marks here, babe. Hustle in.
You talk about coaching him. He is very definitely doing everything he can help.
We'll be a little busy. Go around Jimmy.
For Brian Herta, the leader, now on the pit road.
To the board, look for Ray.
And a distinct advantage for Brian Herta as the lead man in, and now the crew goes to work for the first time.
Keep the revs up.
The reminders you hear on the radio for the driver Herta. Clock is in, you're seeing the time, and he's rolling already. Nice stop, Jan.
And Tony Kanaan has brought his car to the stop, but there were a couple of cars leaving ahead of him, and he had to get on the brakes, and so he couldn't get into a spot as quickly as he would like. 11.9 seconds. And we're still waiting for others, including the 2 Ganassi cars here on pit road.
But the key to that, of course, was you saw Brian Herta go by Tony Kanaan as he was just
on
finishing
pit road.
stuff. But boy, look at this parade.
Boy, there was a lot of brake checks right there, Paul, and we almost had damage. I think everybody got through clean.
Jan?
Both the Ganassi cars are here. We're looking over the back of Jimmy Vasser, and up ahead, Juan Montoya had called in and said he wanted more front wing. The car was pushing. Jimmy Vasser
Go.
swings around the tire. Oh, right in front same time that Montoya leaves. Man, it was busy down here.
Well, that was as tight a set of stops as we've seen in a long time. I'm surprised, especially on the route in, that we didn't see some contact. Maybe we did and didn't know it.
And what's very difficult for Montoya and Vassar, and we don't pick it up on the TV camera, their pits are uphill. It's very, very difficult for the drivers to launch these cars out. Jimmy Vassar with an aggressive move. He picked up and held his position there. Very, very good heads-up driving.
So Brian Herta through the pit stop under the full course caution remains the leader of the race. Tony Kanaan in second. Max Pappas listed in third. Third century Sports Center of the Decade from the 1980s. Boy, what great memories there are there. At Laguna Seca, California, under the full course caution, 26 laps complete. This was that parade that headed into the pits, Parker.
Watch Montoya. Oh, there's contact there, Paul. We had a bit of a disagreement there, but I think he definitely got back into the car in front of him. We saw contact from the right rear to the front wing. We'll take a look here and see if we can find any rubber marks on the front of Montoya's wing.
As we take a look to see if we can find a mark on Montoya's wing, we show you the pit in and out with no changes at all during that first round of stops. The stops came just a little bit early. It came when this man, Helio Castroneves, stopped over on the front straightaway. They've gotten him back into his pit area now. The cowling is off over the engine, and engines have been the bane of this team through much of the season.
But I think I won the bet, Paul. I think I saw a big black mark on the left side of Montoya's nose.
During the round of stops, Jan Magnussen and Jourdain exchanged 16th and 17th position. Only real change. Back to green flag racing. Here we go again. Fernandez works down onto the inside. Now, so careful. Moore finally pulls way wide, and in doing that, he gives not only one position away, but gives away two.
Tracy was able to get back down the inside. Adrian, oh! And it's Dario Franchitti, Mauricio Gugelmin making contact. Mauricio gets a turn back around.
Gugelmin off on the left side, driver's left of the course. Gets it back up to speed. Rest of the field coming through.
You see Robbie Gordon with that great slide through turn 4, full opposite lock on the power. Now watch Adrian Fernandez, Paul. He did the smart thing. He had the pass made, wheel to wheel on the inside, kept it that way. But now as they come back into turn 3, watch Dario Franchitti, left front, gets into Mauricio Gugelmin's right rear. Dario's about as close as you can get to having that made, tries to get out of it, but then Mauricio's right rear overruns Dario's left front. He continues. Mauricio gets back into gear and continues as well.
You know, the one question, though, that I almost hesitate to ask, when you get the right rear up against Dario's left front, you've got to ask yourself, what about Dario's suspension? Any damage there?
Well, obviously, the right rear of Mauricio's car is going to be a little bit stronger than the front suspension, but we'll see with a few laps. We'll keep track of those lap times and make sure that his car is all right.
So keeping an eye on Dario Franchitti. Herta leads Tony Kanaan in this field, looking a little further back now. Cristiano D'Amata working his way down. We're actually back about 18th position. Montermini and the Dan Gurney Eagle. There is Mauricio Gugelmin. After that, off and on, all appears to be well there, but at the front of the field, it is not what we saw before the pit stops. The leaders, the top 4, Herta, Kanaan, Pappas, and Andretti, and in fact, Fernandez, are all fairly close together now. I want to take it back to the Fernandez-Greg Moore as they came down into 2.
You can see Adrian's got the inside. He did the smart thing here. He kept it wheel to wheel, so their wheels didn't interlock. Pushed Greg Moore to the outside there. This set up the whole chain of events, blocked up traffic. You can see Mauricio there trying to keep the car to the inside to keep from contacting Greg Moore. That gave Dario the run on Mauricio going into turn 3.
And on that restart from the full course caution, Jan Magnussen got around Patrick Carpentier for 14th, and Robbie Gordon was also able to get around Mimo Gidley. And that pass was for 18th position. Jan Bigas?
Just spoke with Carl Hogan and asked what happened to Helio Castroneves, and they said they don't know, that the throttle was not opening, that it just was at a closed position, and he wasn't able to continue. They didn't really change anything. They brought it in, they loosened everything up, freed it up, and it appears as though it's working now, and they're dumbfounded. They don't know what happened.
Gary Gerald, Dario Franchitti, his suspension.
Yeah, quick word with Kim Green. Said, well, everything must be okay because Dario, hasn't said anything on the radio. Meanwhile, right next door in the adjacent pit, the crew with Russ Cameron backing Mauricio Guzman. He stayed out on the track. Apparently everything all right as far as Mauricio is concerned as well after that quick incident.
Montermini off the track on the way up the hill. He slides off across the gravel pit, barely touches the wall. I don't see any damage on the wing. Got a piece of one of the banners caught up on the edge of his tire, though, Parker.
Very difficult corner, uphill turn 6. It's blind on the entry. Just missed the turn in, got off the outside. It falls off camber there. Very, very fortunate to not make contact, heavy contact with the outside wall. We can see him just bump it there. Usually if you go off the outside, it results in a big crash.
And that's those gravel pits actually doing their job and slowing the car down without upsetting it much. But you may have noticed that he did catch the wall beyond where they had the tire barrier protection.
And look at the amount of gravel that we saw him spraying out of the back of the car as he came down the hill. That's not good news for the rest of the competitors. One thing I wanted to mention during that contact with Adrian Fernandez and Greg Moore, what great athletes these drivers are, how they're able to multi-process so much information. As Adrian Fernandez was staying wheel to wheel with Greg Moore, we saw him lift his right hand off the wheel, protecting that damaged wrist while trying to control a 900 horsepower Champ car while making contact with Greg Moore.
Back at the front, Brian Herta now has a very insistent Tony Kanaan working him. It's not what we saw in the first laps of the race. Kanaan is in fact sticking with him. We're going to watch from up above. Jan Beekes
just spoke with Steve Horn and asked if they made any changes on their pit stop. He shook his head no. We haven't changed the car at all, and he likes the way it is right now.
On 2 cars off. Back when looks to be Franchitti. And let's hope he has kept the engine going, but he might be high-sided there on the track.
I think you're right, Paul. Looks like he's dug those rear wheels down. And remember, these cars sit right on the ground.
Indeed, it is Franchitti. Here's how he got there.
Looking down the inside of Greg Moore, he just doesn't.
Oh!
He just doesn't have the pass completed there, Paul.
Oh, look at the right front.
Yeah, it's severely damaged there, Paul. You can see the suspension bend, pieces coming off the left front of that car.
And so the championship, which started to go bad for Franchitti at Vancouver, goes much worse here. Severe damage to the front right suspension of that car. He's high-sided. They'll certainly have to go full yellow. Greg Moore is now beginning to show some smoke at the back of his car.
And as heavy a contact as there was between the right front of Dario Franchitti and the back of Greg Moore, who knows what problems that created. That was a big hit.
Well, they're talking about the tire, but
hammered by Dario, and I got big smoke coming out now every time I go on the gas.
Crew's telling him to shut it down.
Yeah, it's much more than anything with the suspension. Looks to be a problem on the right bank of that engine.
Well, when we came first running up here, there was a lot of raw flame coming from the rear exhaust area as the crew down unbuttons the bodywork more.
Well, at the top of the corkscrew, the run continues on with Brian Herta and Tony Kanaan still battling for the lead. We wondered about a full course caution with Franchitti sitting just off the end of turn 2. They have not yet considered that possibility. Interested in what's going on in racing, don't forget RPM tonight at 9. Lots going on this weekend. The run here, Tony Stewart with a nice victory. For more, log on to ESPN.com, part of the Go Network, go.com. Well, at Laguna Seca Raceway, 34 laps are complete. No change at the front of the field. For a second there, you rode with 4th place Michael Andretti in his pursuit of Max Pappas. There comes Michael through. Here is Fernandez and Paul Tracy. You've just seen the front of the order. Now that group begins to climb the hill up toward the top of the corkscrew. Pappas is conserving fuel very efficiently here.
Very, very well. Remember that it wasn't that many races ago where he was robbed of victory at the US 500 because he ran out of fuel in the last corner of the last lap. Now he is balancing speed and mileage extremely well. Keep in mind, these drivers are driving absolutely as hard as they know how. As they turn down the fuel, all they're doing is reducing the top end horsepower a little bit, increasing that fuel mileage, but still driving extremely hard. And we also have reports that Brian Herta's also getting great fuel mileage. I should mention Tony Kanaan has turned the race's quickest lap at a 1:10.6. Second quickest, Brian Herta, at a 1:10.9. But now all the times have backed up just a little bit as his fuel conservation strategy comes into play.
You saw the safety team removing Dario Franchitti's car from the race course. He was, of course, out of the cockpit. That's after contact with Greg Moore, who subsequently at the end of the lap came into the pit showing fire at the right rear of his car. Gary Gerald, what's the story?
Greg Moore stands by. Greg, did the contact have anything to do with the reason you being forced out, you know?
Yeah, that's what it was. There's something, I guess, when Dario and I came together there down in turn 1, something broke loose in the back of the car and was spraying oil all over the place, and we couldn't fix it, in time to get back out. So it's unfortunate. We had a good start. We were running around pretty good, and we could have been in the top 5 again today. Just, I don't know.
How frustrated do you get when it just seems like you're in a stretch here where you can't buy a break?
I mean, you get super frustrated, but, you can't get yourself down. We've still got a few more races to go, and we've just got to make sure that we do the best that we can for this team and, see how we do at the end of the year.
See you in Houston. Thank you.
And keep in mind, Greg Moore is 6th place in the championship. There are only 5 points between 6th and 10th. So every one of these races crucial to the year-end championship.
Jan Magnussen currently in 12th position, but look how he's moved up from his starting position of 23rd. Helio Castroneves has had his problems today. In fact, they finally have ended his day. Jan Bikas?
Yes, in fact, he's had the problems throughout the season. Is it a throttle-related issue for you?
Well, yes, unfortunately, I didn't have I couldn't go into power. The throttle was stopping like nowhere. I don't know what happened, something on the chassis or something like that, and it's a shame. On the start, I got hit on someone, and I almost ran off. But it was a fun race. I mean, very tough to pass here, and it's a shame. But I think we finished a couple of one. We come back again. Let's do it again.
And unfortunately, I guess your teammate just went off course. Thanks.
Yeah, Luis Garcia Jr. just ran off the end of the track. He obviously is still running and going to try to get it going. Locked the brakes coming in behind Hearn and couldn't make the turn in.
Boy, and he just missed Richie Hearn. You can see why they have these gravel traps in place.
Good news was that Garcia was able to keep the engine running, and there he goes rejoining the course, but there's some cars screaming down the hill right behind him. Yellow flags fly from the corner stations. Again, on these big road courses, most of the corner workers are all volunteer from the different regions of the Sports Car Club of America. Oh, no. Another car off the course. They're now beginning to get a little desperate as Mimo Gidley, teammate to Michel Jourdain Jr., who was running in 20th, comes off the course, but keeps the power going and continues on. The report is that Gidley had some contact with Carpentier. There it is again, Parker.
They come down into the turn number 11, the corner that leads onto the pit straight. Carpentier's got the inside there. Mimo comes down for the apex, doesn't give Patrick enough racing room. Patrick trying to yield the outside. They make contact. End of story.
Yeah, Patrick was all the way up on the curbing trying to get away from him on the inside of the 11th and final turn of this course. Back to the front. Brian Herta, 1.1 second. It really is insignificant at this point, ahead of Tony Kanaan. Pappas is third, followed by Andretti and Fernandez. "38 laps are complete." Fuel strategy is going to be the key, I think, to the end of this thing. We want to take you back to Juan Montoya. He really hasn't progressed the way we would have expected. He currently sits in 10th. That was Garcia still coming back up to speed that you saw.
I'm just wondering, Paul, we've mentioned it in the past, how many times Montoya has made last-minute changes to this car, gotten it right for the race. They didn't have the opportunity this weekend to do that. He's still coming up through the field, just not as quickly as I had anticipated.
Just a bit.
You can hear Chip Ganassi telling him they're really working the fuel strategy. I imagine we won't see anything of note from Montoya until the final stages of the race.
Montoya, 10th behind Pruitt. Jan?
Well, the interesting thing is that you would expect if Juan Montoya was having trouble with his car, he'd be all over the radio saying, I need this or I need that. But the funny thing is, it's been pretty much silent, with the exception of what we heard Chip Ganassi telling him to save some fuel. He really hasn't said a word.
Only a slight change for Montoya on the pit stop, so he must feel comfortable with the car, but still we haven't seen the performance. It could be part of the overall strategy of Montoya. He certainly has to be relieved that his nearest competitor in the championship is already out of this run. Cristiano D'Amata just came into the pits, and from the attitude of the crew with the calling off, it looks like something very serious at the back end of his car. While we were away, one situation on the course in a battle for 11th place, Magnussen was able to challenge Gil de Ferran. Now you see Magnussen there. That's really putting Garcia a lap down. Here is when Magnussen was able to make his move on de Ferran.
Very clean pass down the inside of turn number 2.
And in doing so, Magnussen picks up 11th, putting de Ferran back. Now, one thing to look at, consider the top 5 in the field, and consider, too, that Honda is a single point away from a manufacturer's championship, but of the top 5, 4 of those cars are Fords, including the leader, Kanaan being the lone Honda entry there.
And I don't think there's any dispute in the paddock that Ford has the most top-end horsepower, but the Honda engines had the best drivability. In fact, it's all the way back to 1997 at Vancouver when Mauricio Gugelmin won for Mercedes. Since that time, Honda has won every street or road course. So tremendous gains from Ford. Keep in mind, they've already tested their new engine on a couple of different occasions. It's run flawlessly. It's got more horsepower, more torque, better drivability. I think that's probably shaken up the other manufacturers. But right now, Ford is doing extremely strong, with Honda looking for that championship to be put to bed here with Tony Kanaan. Brian Herta, though, running very, very strongly in front of him.
And already Ford is looking far ahead. Well, they all are, but Ford especially looking ahead to next season. They've already begun to test their new engine, Jan.
Yes, and Parker was just talking about some of the aspects of that engine, and some of the additional aspects are it's 18% lighter and 2 inches shorter, which is huge. And they really say that they do feel, as Parker said, it makes more top-end power. Roberto Moreno ran it in Sebring, got out and said, I have to make sure that I get a ride with a Ford-powered car for next year. They're excited about it.
And in fact, speaking of Roberto Moreno, he's back in 8th place now and starting to work on Jimmy Vasser. Here comes Vasser. There's Moreno, with the possibility that Christian Fittipaldi will be back behind the steering wheel of that car before the end of the season, which is a surprise to many of us, because Christian himself indicated that while he hoped to be back before the end of the year, it was not a strong possibility. But now they're saying perhaps he will be back, and as soon as the race at Houston in 2 weeks.
Well, with the head injury that he suffered, we want to make sure that he's fully healed. He can't take the risk of another big crash at this time. So he's still holding down a top 10 spot in the championship. We hope he comes back soon.
Brian Herta remains the leader over Tony Kanaan and Max Pappas. No change in the top 3, while Franchitti is consoled being out early. It was totally unexpected. Tony Kanaan pulled out of 2nd place into the pits and climbed out of the car. Jan Beekes?
Well, he was a very frustrated Tony Kanaan, and I understand it's gearbox related.
Yeah, it's not a gearbox. It's some bolt that was holding the knob, and it's a tough one. The car was very good. We were saving a lot of fuel. Hey, another tough one.
A very inexpensive part, put an expensive machine out of this one.
In fact, a 6th tough one. His 6th DNF of the year for Kanaan. For Dario Franchitti, he now suffers his 4th DNF, and that has a substantial effect upon the battle for the championship. Montoya still leads the championship and will leave this track as the leader in the points. But the best battle on the track right now involves Montoya, because right behind him in 10th place is Jan Magnussen, and Magnussen has been working him hard.
And you can see the effort that Montoya is putting into this. He's locking up brakes. He's sliding the car coming off the corners. Magnussen, very clean, very collected. We've watched him gain nearly 5/10 of a second a lap on Juan Montoya. You see him lock up the brakes, Paul.
Oh, Magnussen puts the nose right underneath the...
That was good.
Chip Ganassi says that was good. Magnussen's working him hard. while Montoya locked the brakes up coming down the hill.
Now, we haven't heard much on the radio from Montoya. We talked about it a little earlier. You know, Paul, the problem is the only thing that Montoya can do with this car in this final stop is tire pressure and wing angle. He's not going to be on the radio complaining about the shocks or the springs or the sway bars or things that he can't change. I can't believe that he's happy with this car. There's just nothing he can do about it except drive what he has as hard as he can. But we can see Magnussen has just got a better car underneath him. He's driving it extremely well. And of course he wants to get past Montoya because he's looking for a ride for the year 2000 as well.
Gary Gerald, I would suspect that Magnussen is more than pleased with his car.
Well, he's pleased with the performance, but there's major concern, Paul, that may temper that amount of pleasure. Temperatures have been going up consistently. They're very concerned of an overheating problem, but I just got word that on the last lap, it mysteriously dropped 5 degrees. So they've got fingers crossed in the Patrick Racing pit. Clearly, Magnussen got a great drive going. The question is, will that temperature level off?
Oh, that's okay. I got a car at home does that all the time.
Well, the problem he's got, Paul, is that as he trails Montoya, the air that's coming into his radiator ducting is now heated by Montoya's air, and the closer he runs, the hotter his engine's going to run. So he's got to be careful here. In fact, we can see he's dropped back just a little bit, but his engine may be overheating, but the driver obviously is right where he needs to be to take advantage of a good car and a good day.
And while we've been watching this action, Patrick Carpentier and Mark Blundell have been battling for 14th place. Take a look at this. Blundell down inside Carpentier. Little trail breaking into the corner. And Carpentier has to give way to Blundell. Blundell now runs 14th.
And it's a brave maneuver to pass at the top of the corkscrew. Mark obviously got a great run coming up the hill out of turn 6. And you've got to time it just right because remember, it's blind to the drivers. So if you're out braking someone, then you have no visual references at all. All you can do is just pray that when the car comes back down on the ground, you're in the right place. You've got the brakes on at the right time. Great pass by Mark Blundell.
Past Carpentier, Blundell now is working on Robbie Gordon. Again this weekend in one of Dan Gurney's Eagles that the arrangement was made between Gordon and the Dan Gurney All-American Racers operation. He's been running both cars. He had the Swift out a little bit. Well, this time Blundell worries him bad and gets inside of Gordon, takes the corner.
Uncharacteristic mistake there from Robbie. He got into turn 5 a little high, a little hot, locked up the inside wheel, slid wide. That's all the opportunity Mark Blundell needed in that Motorola car. And now he's come up into 13th place with that pass.
So Brian Hurt is still the leader. Max Pappas now up to 2nd place. Andretti is 3rd. Fernandez is 4th. And Paul Tracy is 5th. Remember, Dario Franchitti is out of this run. Montoya, the leader in the championship fight, is currently running 9th. So 34 laps to go here at Laguna Seca Raceway. But there's many other things going on in the sports world. So we send you to our ESPN studios and Brian Kenny. No changes back at Laguna Seca Raceway. Brian Herta is still the leader, but we do anticipate that we're about 4.5 laps from the 2nd round of pit stops. We'll be back for those. The front of the field as we look down on Laguna Seca Raceway from the Honda Helicam. It's Herta, Pappas, Andretti. The top 3 52 laps are now complete. And Mark Blundell is just flying up through this field. He was 22nd on the 28th lap. This was just a few seconds ago as he came inside Michel Jourdain Jr., who's having a very good run himself today, and just poked the nose in, and then it looked like Jourdain lost a gear or missed a gear as they came off the corner. So Blundell picked up 12th place and Jourdain fell back just a little bit. Paul Tracy in and out. Routine, probably a little ahead of schedule though. Or is it a schedule that gets him in theory by the team to the end of the race?
Well, he's got to make 30 laps worth of fuel, which means he's got to get great mileage on this next round. We should see the leaders coming in now in the next lap or two, Paul.
Both of these cars, the one you ride with, which is Juan Montoya, the one behind him, Jan Magnussen, both due into the pits at the end of this lap. Robbie Gordon at the top of the corkscrew. Quick spin off. He was in the pits for routine service, and no, he's got a dead engine there. He's going to have to get some help from the kart safety team in order to get restarted.
So hard for the drivers. They gained 250 pounds in weight. With the added fuel, they're on cold tires. You crest this rise, you can't see the braking area. Oh man, he was just on the paint stripe there, started to lock up the rears, tried to catch it, just dropped the wheels off the edge of the track, but unfortunately stalled the engine.
That was Max Pappas in second place and Michael Andretti in third, that both came inside of Gordon as he lost it at the top of the hill. We expect the leader of the race, Brian Herta, to be in this lap as well. And Magnussen is in. Gary?
Still concerned about temperatures for Magnussen as a full course yellow is being displayed. We've got watch at the rear of the exits. We want to see if they do anything to open up the radiator exit. No, they don't, but he stalls the car. Herta's crew, meanwhile, waiting in the pit adjacent just behind him. Montoya's also in. Engine fire for Magnussen. He's gone.
And Juan Montoya, they put in some front wing. The pace car just leaves from pit exit, and that is going to kill the guys that came in that were not able to wait for that full course yellow.
This is where the strategy really pays off. If you can stretch that mileage and catch a lucky break on a yellow.
The mark.
Here's Brian Herta in, Gary.
Yes,
Zero
indeed.
the meter, revs up. Watch your speed, leaving.
They're concerned about the car going loose. They said they'd make an adjustment on air pressure, waiting for the fueling. Tires are complete. Herta rolls, no traffic. 14 seconds, and he's out of here.
Teammate Pappas behind him has some sort of a problem. Finally, they get it going. And they get him back into the fight. But of course, Michael Andretti with that long stop. Here comes Michael, and he picks up the position. Jimmy Vasser in. John?
Yeah, that was about a 14.5-second pit stop for Jimmy Vasser. No apparent changes to the wings for him. But of course, they did put front wing into Montoya's car.
Well, with all the changes on the stops, again under the full course caution for Robbie Gordon up at the top of the corkscrew. Vasser for a moment picked up second place. From Michael Andretti's onboard camera, this was Robbie Gordon.
You hold your breath for just a moment, you go, great, I'm through it. Paul, this is the worst thing that Brian Herta could have wanted. He had over a 7.5-second lead. Now he's got the pressure of the rest of the field behind him for the next run to the checkered flag.
And with the help of the kart safety team, Robbie Gordon is restarted, coming down the hill. But because of his spin, we remain under full course caution. Laguna Seca Raceway, full course caution still in effect. Sports and the internet, the changing face of sports. Outside the Lines, presented by AT&T. 7 o'clock Tuesday. For more, log on to ESPN.com. Part of the Go Network, go.com. Well, under the full course caution, Dario Franchitti, we mentioned, has been out now for some time. Perhaps by now he's had time to think over what happened there, Gary.
Dario, it must be doubly frustrating when there's contact with one of your best buddies on the racing circuit. How did you see it, or what can you tell us about the incident with Greg Moore?
Well, it was definitely holding me up quite a lot, so I really needed to get by him to make any inroads on the guys in front. There's only so many places you can make up on a pit stop. You've got to make places up on the track. I got out of it a couple of times. I got good runs on him. He was braking very deep. I got alongside him a couple of times and I had to get out of it. But that one time I got alongside him, I was right up against the curb. And, there's only so far you can back out of it. He gave me no room. So, I mean, it's one of those things. I went in there very hard and he didn't give me any room. So, I feel bad for Greg. And I feel bad for my guys, it's one of those things.
Time running out on the championship. How much does that hurt?
Of course it hurts, but you've got to try out there. You can't. From the way we qualified yesterday, there's nothing we could have done. We had to pass people on the track.
Well, this time under the full course caution, as the stops came in and out, there were a couple of differences made that affected the top of the order. Michael Andretti was able to get from third up to second. We take a look at the full field summary. And Max Pappas stalling the engine. He had to drop down one position from second to third. But the engine stall, apparently just something in the pits, has no effect on his further race. So Brian Herta, still the leader. We still remain under full course caution. Back at Laguna Seca Raceway, they were anticipating the green flag just seconds ago, but then Naoki Hattori got it sideways, and they had to send out the safety team to collect him and give him a push and get him going again. So that extended by at least one lap the current full course yellow session. After 57 laps, Brian Herta remains the leader of the race. There's the lifts out of the race, most notable among them Dario Franchitti, as his championship hopes, well, they won't go that far away, given the fact that Montoya sits currently in 9th place. Montoya took a big jump at Vancouver. It won't be quite as big here. Some other discussion, a little bit of confusion. Jan Beekes.
Well, first of all, we said that anyone who had pitted just prior to that full course yellow was going to be in trouble. However, most of the guys who pitted, including Montoya, beat the pace car out before it actually left to pick up the leaders. So therefore, they really didn't have the penalty that you would normally associate with pitting before the full course yellow came out. So a lucky break for all those in question.
Well, that could have been devastating had they not gotten past the pace car.
That's exactly right, but the good news here is with the extension of this yellow flag, it should relieve any fuel concerns. Most of these guys, I would imagine at this point, should be able to turn the power up and race to the end of the race.
And
Gary
Parker,
Gerald?
yeah, I wanted to add in that respect, they've just given Brian Herta the indication that for at least the next few laps, they're going to let him run at 100% fuel. So that certainly would fall right in line with your speculation there.
I think the calculations are going to make it close, but I think you're right, Gary. I think they should be able to do it depending on the power plant and how hard the driver's going. Oh, and it looks like Robbie Gordon had just slid off there in turn 6. Remember, we saw him earlier at the top of the corkscrew on new tires and full tanks, and now he's stuck. So this very much will eliminate any fuel concerns, as they'll have to pull Robbie out of that deep sand trap.
Yeah, this is a slide off and a dig in. Look at him spin the rears.
He's not going to go anywhere until they get the safety equipment in there and pull him out. But the good news is it will just be a Saturday night main sprint to the end now for all of these drivers.
So the caution that could have been over by now has been extended by first Hattori and now Robbie Gordon. You know, this is almost literally Brian Herta's racetrack. Look at his success going all the way back through the Indy lights, and the last driver to lead flag to flag at Laguna Seca was Michael Andretti in 1992. That may be a change of record as well before this day's over. Been extended now by Robbie Gordon's misadventure on the way up at the top of the hill, but there may be a problem here with our leader now. Gary Gerald?
Well, it's one of those where the crew down here has got their fingers crossed. This is a situation they don't know a lot about, but Brian was apparently complaining of a potential throttle problem. If it was sticking, we just checked with Skip Rumpke and the crew, and he grinned and he says, well, we don't know how bad it is. It could potentially be dangerous. We're hoping it's just a case of our driver getting antsy and hearing things out there at this particular point. And I guess they shall soon find out. And let's hope that nothing of consequence or significance here for Herta.
And Robbie Gordon, after that off that we saw up at 6, decided that's enough for the day, and he climbed out of the race car and over the wall on the outside of the course.
Will we finish the race?
Listening to conversation with Richie Hearn, John Della Penna, his owner.
If we run 100% like we planned on it, will we finish the race?
I think we will if it stays green. I don't think there'll be any problem. It's close, but I think we can make it.
Now, the reason we're paying attention to this is you saw Hearn behind the pace car when this full course caution began. They waved him around, and then after he went around the pace car, they pitted. Kart officials say that can't be done, and so they're going to call him in for more than a stop and go. It's going to be a stop and wait. They say the time interval is going to be 70 seconds.
Because obviously the reason they do that is you could take a great advantage of the field if you could get waved to the back, then do your pit stop. And so Kart wants to eliminate that potential of an unfair advantage. They want everyone to come in on the same time, regain their track position with only the advantage of their crews outperforming maybe one of the other crews. So Richie Hearn will have to do that stop and wait.
And what they're giving him is essentially a one-lap penalty, because that approximates a single lap time here at Laguna Seca. Now with Brian Herta leading the field, Michael Andretti in second, owing to the stall that Max Pappas suffered on his pit stop. Dropped Pappas back to third. They begin their acceleration heading for turn 11.
Oh, Brian Herta
locks him up big time as he comes into the corner, but he still maintains position. But that bottles everybody up behind him. Still they go green. Boy, look at the group that's heading down into the corner behind him.
Max Pappas, Roberto Moreno taking advantage of that miscue. Michael Andretti got out of sequence with gears going down into that final corner. When Brian Herta got wide.
Moreno jumped down the inside. Vassar as well. Look at Vassar as he moves on the outside of Max Pappas. Michael Andretti loses it. Andretti loses it coming off the corner. Oh, and Andretti's going to try to get back into traffic in front of Mark Blundell. A lot of action quickly, and it began there when Brian Herta got on the brakes hard going into turn 11 and then kind of stuttered up the hill to the green flag, bunching everybody up behind him.
Boy, it's hard to tell if Jimmy Vassar and Michael Andretti didn't have contact there. From Jimmy's right side tires and Michael's left front. Let's take a look here, see if we can see. You can see him coming off at turn 3, very close there. Jimmy looking to the outside of Max Pappas, slows down, turns into the apex. Yes, they made contact there.
And now the report is that Jimmy Vassar is off the circuit, but it's on off and on, and he's continuing. Looking at the right side of his race car, driver's right, make sure that there's not a problem there. But look at what this does for Roberto Moreno. You saw him make that great move, going down into turn 2, moves around Pappas and into second place.
Roberto Moreno started 14th. He has just slowly been making his way to the front, hasn't made a mistake all day. Now hunting down Brian Herta. Paul, think of the different mindset for Brian Herta. Prior to this yellow flag, a 7.5-second lead, in full control of the race. Now he knows with 21 laps to go, everybody's at full power. They are directly behind him. If he makes the slightest mistake, remember it was only a few years ago, we're coming into this next corner in turn number 6. He made a slight bobble that allowed Alessandro Zanardi to get a run on him to make that famous pass at the top of the corkscrew.
Look at the side pod of Jimmy Vassar's car as he comes into the pits, and Jan Vikas waits for him.
Well, they'll see if they'll be able to effect repairs. They'll obviously go, and in fact, you can see by the hand signals that Jimmy Vassar is done for this day.
Got into the radiator there. You can see it leaking fluid. Very disappointing for Jimmy Vassar. He had a great run from 13th up to the front. This is his hometown track. He's lived not very many miles from here growing up. Started his career in quarter midgets. 96 series champion. Had a very, very good run going here today.
An angry, if not livid, Jimmy Vassar climbs out of the car, back to the battle at the front. A 3-car battle, Herta, Moreno, Pappas. Then some interval back to Paul Tracy, who started 11th and now runs 4th. Look, though, at Roberto Moreno's helmet, Parker. I mean, he's been up in the exhaust of a lot of cars today. That normally yellow helmet is pretty well splattered on the front.
The last time we saw a helmet like that was Richie Hearn back in Detroit, where it was just covered with oil. He had used up all of his tear-offs very early in the race. I would imagine that Roberto's done the same thing, and he's got to have good visibility here to pick out these almost obscure reference points here at Laguna Seca.
About 20 laps to go to the end of the run here at Laguna Seca. Everybody has made their final stops of the race. You saw Scott Pruitt heading up the hill. He's having a good run today as well, running in 7th place. This is Michael Andretti's on board.
Coming down into turn 2. Oh, he locks it up as Max locks it up. Moreno slips by the inside in front of Max. There's Jimmy now, just off the left side. Watch what happens at the apex of turn 3.
It's not over yet.
Boom.
There's the hit. Difficult to assign that to Michael, though, isn't it? So Brian Herta leads it. Jimmy Vassar now joins those who watch this race from the edge of the pits. We'll be back. Told you about Scott Pruitt and the great day he's having. So is Jan Magnussen. Magnussen coming down the hill right behind Pruitt. Now it has become a battle for 7th place. Montoya is just behind Magnussen.
Scott Pruitt, his best road street course qualifying of the year in 8th place. He has been mistake-free all day long. This is also a hometown racetrack for Scott. Lots of family and visitors here. Here comes Magnussen looking down the inside.
Oh, and he gets up on the curbing. Something goes in the air. I'm assuming it's come off of Magnussen's right front, and it has.
He's missing the whole right front wing section there. He is a lame duck at this point. Watch Montoya and Carpentier make a run on him.
So Magnuson tries to make the move on Pruitt. He gets in trouble.
We've seen this a number of times coming down into this corner. He wasn't side by side. Scott Pruitt's not going to give a position away to anybody. Scott turns down, they make contact, Magnuson loses. And now look at him fall back. And without that right front wing, he loses a significant amount of downforce. Basically, the car just won't turn its speed.
That's what's left of the right front from Magnuson, laying out in the center of the racetrack. His owner, Pat Patrick, by the way, owner of this car, and Adrian Fernandez, not here. First time in a long time. He's actually over in Italy. Was at the Formula One. And no indication whatsoever as to what he was doing there. Almost to the point of mystery. Adrian Fernandez, on the other hand, currently runs in 5th place. Scary, any word on how his wrist is doing? Any complaints?
Paul, we just asked about that moments ago, and Kevin Diamond, the spokesman for the team, indicated that there has been no comment on the radio conversation with his crew relating to that wrist that has, of course, the plate and the many screws or pins in there after the multiple breaks on the streets of Belle Isle at Detroit. He has been very cool, very methodical on the radio. Fernandez has come back with a vengeance and apparently doing a terrific job as a top 5 man.
I was actually surprised that he came back so quickly from what was really a terrible fracture of his right wrist. But look at the wonderful job he's doing today, running in 5th place. Now, Jimmy Vasser, contact with Michael Andretti. His day is done, Jan.
Yes, we've seen a lot of contact down that area of the racetrack. Jimmy, what happened between you and Michael?
Well, it all started, you know, down in the second corner, and they were all messed up, and I just kind of quit down the almost alongside Pappas as well, and then I gave way to Pappas. He went wide, and I just got T-boned by Michael, and he took out my radiator, and then I spun on my water, and I guess you call that racing, but it's disappointing. You know, we had a good race going, and both Michael and I both got put back, and I'm not sure if it was necessary on his part or on my part. I have to see the replay, but I really, honestly, I didn't see Michael alongside him. I was more alongside Pappas, and then, bam, you know.
Thanks, Jimmy. Thanks.
All right, thank you.
And they were definitely clogged up running down to that corner. A little hesitancy on the restart of the race. Jimmy Vasser, like Scott Pruitt, would consider Laguna Seca his own track, so we really hope to do more and certainly better here. Brian Herta continues to lead. Only change in the race since we've been away. And Magnuson, we thought he was going to try to keep it out for a while, but then suddenly he turned into the pits, and Gary, it turned out to be more than disappearing right front wing.
Yeah, we believe it's a gearbox problem. He has just climbed out of the car, had a quick conversation with Jim McGee, and I think we'll be able to get a word with him. Let me slide around here. Kevin is talking with him. Kevin, can we get a quick word with Jan? Can we get a quick word here with Jan? Starting way back there, making such a marvelous run. Did the contact lead to the gearbox problem?
No, I don't think so. Contact was just took some of the front wing off. Then one lap later, I had a problem with the gear selector, so it's a shame, you know. Things were going really well. That's how it is.
It looks like you have certainly showed everyone in the last few races your capability in this series. Do you have plans? Are you going to be in this series next year?
I really want to stay for next year, but we'll have to see.
All right, Jan Magnuson.
We are certainly at that point in the season which there is some desperation among those who have no deals for next year or who are threatened by loss of a deal for next year. Now coming down to the final runs of the year. At the front of this field, Brian Herta is the leader, but Roberto Moreno, driving for Newman Haas, is not letting go of him. Currently 6th in second place, 1 second behind. There's Max Pappas coming through, and Paul Tracy, who has stayed consistent and in the run. Adrian Fernandez. Gil DeFerrin comes up the hill. And here comes Scott Pruitt and the entire group that runs with him, Montoya, Compartier, and Michael Andretti.
Scott Pruitt has driven a perfect race today in that Pioneer Electronics car. He's got thousands and thousands of miles here, having run a lot of different classes of cars. He's He's had a frustrating season, but he and his engineer, John Dick, have really managed to come together the last few races. Some great performances for Cal Wells' team.
Parker, of course, I know you're involved, along with Paul and myself. We're headed up to Sacramento area tomorrow, where Scott hosts his 3rd annual golf tournament, and they're raising hundreds of thousands of dollars for charity. Just another one of those little side things that sometimes we don't give these drivers enough credit for.
Well, in addition to picking up a single point for taking the pole position, Brian Herta now has obviously picked up the point for leading the most laps here, and his over 70 laps in the lead has moved him to 2nd place on the Laguna Seca lap leader list. Number 1 on that list, car owner Bobby Rahal.
Carpentier really pushing Montoya. Remember, Carpentier had that great run last week in Vancouver, finishing 2nd.
Fifth place. This is Adrian Fernandez. We're going to sit back and just enjoy a lap with him. One lap with Adrian Fernandez. We take you back to the front. Brian Herta being chased by Roberto Moreno, who's nibbled away 2/10 off of Bobby Rahal's leading car. We'll be back for the checkered flag right after these messages from the Honda Grand Prix of Monterey. Laguna Seca Raceway now with just over 7 laps to go. Brian Herta is still the leader. Roberto Moreno still working him just as hard as he can in what may be the very last run in this car. There is some anticipation that Christian Fittipaldi may be back as early as when everyone goes to the streets of Houston in just 2 weeks. Now, we're going to look up the field here. Here comes Max Pappas through. There's Paul Tracy, who has had a nice, steady, and consistent run today.
From 11th place up to 4th. Hasn't made a mistake. His team has given him great pit stops. This is what we saw prior to the previous 2 races at Vancouver and Chicago, where there is a little bit of a chinking in the armor there. Paul has driven very, very intelligently this year, very consistently. Another good run in the top 4 now.
So Tracy runs in 4th place. A little further back in the field behind Tracy is Adrian Fernandez. We've mentioned him. We've mentioned that right wrist and its potential to affect his run.
6 to go, Paul. -3, front 6.
Radio communication to Tracy. There's Fernandez, but look right behind him. There's Jill DeFerrin.
And we saw with the onboards with Adrian Fernandez how much stress is put on that right wrist between shifting and turning. Shows you how mentally tough this very, very personable young man is. And Jill DeFerrin, a great run. Remember, he started up in 9th place, fell back, and has now worked his way back up into 6th place. A very good run. Remember, his first win came here just a few years ago.
And while attrition has certainly had an effect on the top of this order with some pretty key players like Franchitti, like Vassar out of the run here, there are some people that are having a spectacularly good day. One of them is Scott Pruitt. You see him now starting to run up the hill with Juan Montoya and Patrick Carpentier right behind him.
And you mentioned attrition. Scott Pruitt's run here all day long. Very, very strong run. As Gary said, we're going to his charity event tomorrow. Great man. And here he is in front of his home crowd, putting on one of the best performances of the year.
Montoya, on the other hand, has really only come forward halfway to his objective. He started 16th, now runs in 8th place, right behind Scott Pruitt. Then comes Carpentier, then comes Michael Andretti, who was further up but got in contact with Jimmy Vassar. Bad news for Vassar, but Michael was able to continue on. Here's the Pac West team, Mauricio Guzman and Mark Blundell running together on the racetrack in 11th and 12th place.
Remember, Mauricio got tangled up earlier. He had qualified 6th, fell back, still running, now in the points. And Mark Blundell, who was charging earlier, had some problems as well, and now he's still on a charge, trying to catch up to his teammate.
Mark Blundell has really been driving the car hard early in the race. He was just carving his way up through this field. Been running laps the entire field at 112, 113 miles an hour on this 11-turn natural terrain road course at Laguna Seca. That is power in the car around here.
When you think that there are a couple of corners that are down in the 45 to 50 mile an hour range, and their top speeds here are just around 180, they're carrying a lot of speed through these corners in order to lap at an average of 112 or 113 miles an hour.
Watching back here because Moreno has not been able to make a move on Brian Herta, the leader of the race. Here comes Mimo Gidley, who's having a good day as well. He sits right now in 13th place. Again, attrition part of that factor, but with only one small incident, he's stayed pretty clean today. Now, we've talked a lot about Roberto Moreno and Christian Fittipaldi. Jan Beekes, what's the story on Christian? Is he back at the next race?
Well, let's ask him and find out. Will we see you back in the car at Houston, Christian?
It's a 50-50%. I'm going to try the car actually this week. I have to go through a couple of exams still. And then whatever Dr. Ovi says, I hope the answer is positive. But if it's not positive, I'm pretty sure that he has a reason for it. And hopefully I'll be back in the car by Houston.
You've got to be very excited that Roberto Moreno in your car is flying today.
Oh, definitely. The Kmart 11 car crew at least is doing a great job. And if I come back to Houston, at least we're going to be in excellent shape.
All right, we hope to see you there.
Thank you.
Christian Fittipaldi, after his first career win in the Champ Cars, suffering that testing crash at St. Louis, taking him out of the run. Sad thing for Christian, but the good news is that hopefully Dr. Steve Alvey will give him a clearance to drive in 2 weeks at Houston. Back at the front of the field, closing laps now with 3 to go. Brian Herta leads Roberto Moreno, and Moreno doesn't seem to be able to do much with Herta. He's falling back 10th by 10th.
Herta's now been able to extend his lead by 1.9 seconds.
Brian Herta's dad watches on. Gary Gerald.
Paul, one of my great memories, not only of last year's racing season when Herta won, but of all time, was watching this man, Tom Herta, the dad. Anybody who's been a parent could relate to his emotions when the checkered flag fell last year and there was redemption, the breakthrough victory for Brian Herta. This man literally leaped off a golf cart. He was just bounding up and down the asphalt here behind pit road. Now Debbie Rahal is coming up, offering encouragement. Everybody there knowing the emotion this man is going through as his son gets closer to a second consecutive win at Laguna Seca.
Now look at that as Brian flashes across the line from the pits here. They may be the worst viewing position in this track that affords so many really good viewing positions. And so the crews can watch them come down the hill toward 11, see them as the helmet flashes by, and then maybe get a glimpse of them as they pass over the hills. You find people like Tom Herta running back and forth behind their pit just trying to get a view of the car. Herta with 2 to go now. Moreno 1.7 back.
One of the questions we haven't addressed, Paul, is why is Brian Herta so fast at Laguna Seca? Brian said, well, you know, he opened the show by saying, well, all these tracks you have to approach the same way. So I talked to some of the other drivers to find out why they thought Brian was so quick. And they said Brian is so smooth that his style perfectly matches this flowing natural terrain course. And Brian, for some reason, has figured out at this particular track exactly how the car has to feel in order to get the most lap time out of it. And you've seen it year after year. No matter what he comes here in, he's dominated, and he's done it once again.
Last lap, no mistakes here, babe.
Bobby Rahal talking to Brian Herta. And remember, Brian Herta's future is very uncertain right now as well. This is going to go a long way to helping him close a deal for next year, but the indications have been for several races now that the likelihood of him being back in this car driving for Bobby Rahal seems to be slim.
There are only a handful of drivers in the world that compete at this level. The openings are few. These drivers are not only driving for position, but literally their careers, their futures. On that last lap, Brian Herta pulled out another 0.3 of a second on Roberto Moreno. This is so important to his future. You know that he's pushing hard, but he can't afford to make a mistake. He just has to come down the hill now, get around the last corner, and then look for that checkered flag. A huge weight will come off of Brian Herta's shoulders and hopefully open some doors for next year.
And it couldn't happen to a nicer man. Brian Herta, a full mile an hour faster on the last lap. Looking now for his second career win and first back-to-back winner at Laguna Seca since Paul Tracy did it in 1993 and 4.
Beautiful, Brian! Beautiful job! Dominating!
That's exactly what he did. Brian Herta dominates Laguna Seca, takes the win, followed by Moreno, Max Pappas, Paul Tracy, and Adrian Fernandez. We'll be back to talk to Herta in just a moment. Add to the records that he was working on. Brian Herta takes the win. For Roberto Moreno and Max Pappas, those are career best. Now let's go to Gary Gerald.
Brian Herta has just been doused by a jubilant crew, but that's got to be the greatest shower you've had since maybe 1 year ago. Tell us about it.
Oh, it really is, Gary. And, you know, I know we don't have a lot of time, but I just want to say a couple things. You know, I'm really happy for today, but our hearts and thoughts and prayers are still with Gonzalo and his family. And, you know, it's a bittersweet day for CART, but, you know, the shell car was so good. Ford engine was great. Firestone tires. And, you know, I definitely want to say hi to the guys back at the shop. Thanks so much. And Dave Letterman and just everybody on the team that, you know, made what was really a crappy season into, you know, something I can be proud of. Thanks.
Savor it.
And savor those kisses from Max Pappas. Brian Herta takes the win at Laguna Seca. We'll have coverage in 2 weeks of the Texaco Grand Prix of Houston as the CART FedEx Championship Series continues. Thanks for joining us.